Hello, I'm C. Virginia Fields, formerly president of the Borough of Manhattan, and currently I serve as president CEO of the National Black Leadership Commission on Health. And through this work, we are furthering our mission of advocacy and empowerment to include not only HIV and AIDS, but also hepatitis C, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, prostate cancer, breast cancer, and sickle cell. Because we know that there is an intersectionality between HIV/AIDS and these other diseases that continue to disproportionately impact African Americans. So we're excited about the work. And today on our show, we'll discuss the impact of COVID-19 on our youth, because many of the disparities in which our work continues to focus clearly shows that African Americans are more vulnerable to COVID-19 because of pre-existing conditions. And we hope to dispel, as it has already been shown, that young people are immune to COVID-19. That was a fallacy at the very beginning. And unfortunately, there was much discussion about it. And young people, including African Americans, Black youth, were saying the same things. Well, they didn't have to worry about it. But clearly, once the data began to be presented, it showed very early on that 25% of the persons who had been hospitalized were between the ages of 18 and 35. So our youth are not immune, and we continue to dispel that. But we also know that our youth are out there doing tremendous work through outreach, education, and engagement. So today on our show, we will discuss the impact of COVID-19 on our youth. And to discuss this, we have Dave Crenshaw, community leader and activist, Javon Martin, student and youth activist, and Caroline Panton, also a student and community activist. Thank you so much for joining our show today. And as I've said, COVID-19 crisis is shedding light on the ongoing health disparities that the African American communities face due to serious structural barriers to accessing quality, affordable health care, including discrimination and higher rates of poverty. And as a result, many of these pre-existing conditions continue to negatively impact our community. Having said that, Dave, I'm now going to turn it over to you, where I'd like to ask you, first of all, to say anything else you want to about our special guest today, and to talk about some of the work that you're doing. And we are going to conclude our session today. I'd just like to have comments from certainly our youth about the protests and where they think we should go from here. Welcome, Dave Crenshaw.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be here. I'm proud of the two young people I have with me. They do a tremendous amount of work in the community. One of the things that Caroline does is making sure she keeps the children fit by having sunrise workouts early in the morning on Zoom and live. And Jay is an activist who's explaining to people that enough is enough. Our people need to be treated better. And he makes videos and slideshows to spread the word that get to young people. So I'm glad to be here, and anything I can do to help improve and uplift our community, that's what I'm all about.
So tell us a little about what you're doing daily now in response to the impact of COVID-19 within the community. And then we'll hear from Javon and Caroline in terms of what they're doing and how they see this playing out.
So what the Dreamers have done is we've had to pivot. All right. Instead of focusing on sports and activities, the gyms are closed, the schools are closed, and the families still need support and they still need bonding. So what we do is we deliver food to people's houses. We deliver food to the families in our program houses so we get a chance to see the children and the families. And one of the other things we do also is we bring books with us because the schools are closed and the libraries are closed and the children don't have a lot of books to read. So we're trying to make sure kids have access to tools that can help them stay smart. And we're trying to make sure no one's hungry. Whether you're in my program or not in my program, my mission is to help that no one uptown is hungry.
And how are you reaching them? I mean, because most people are still sheltering in and not necessarily, interested or actually still afraid to come outside. So how are you reaching the masses of the people that you are trying to provide these resources to?
So I'm gonna tell you my best way to reach them is I reach them on the food lines. I reach them when they have to go shopping because that's when they're standing in front of stores and different things and they can't move. So you get a chance to talk to them. So thanks to an organization I'm with called Black Health, we have lots of PPE that we give out. So folks will come out for masks, folks will come out for gloves, folks will come out for sanitizer, and then you get a chance to meet with them and greet with them and explain if we really don't like what's going on in our city. Step number 1 is to fill out your census. Step number 2 is to make sure you vote.
I'm so glad you mentioned the census because the census is so critically important. And what we at Black Health continues to do around the census is connected to day-to-day living. Resources in your schools, where do they come from? They come from money that comes into the city, the state, from the federal government, and other sources from the federal government primarily to ensure that we have equipment and the right resources in our schools. Health programs, especially as it relates to health care. So everything that we look to as far as resources and some policies that come from the federal government, this gets tied into a census count. And so voting and completing the census are very, very important. So Javon, tell us a little about your thoughts about this and what you're doing and how long have you been engaged in this kind of work and really what made you want to do this?
Hi, so my name is Javon Martin. I'm from Jacqueline Cuneo Onassis High for International Careers. And what made me want to do this is because when you see all the people that are suffering in these streets, like homeless people, you got blacks, every type of race that's struggling. And my whole thing is to give back to the community and do what I can do to help of what they need. Like if it's starving Africans or like homeless people. So what I do is I go and I give them whatever food that I have. Instead of me throwing it out, I will give them the rest of the food that I can't finish. Or if somebody gave me food, I would give them that food instead of saying, oh no, I'm not going to give you food because you're homeless and I'm way better than you. No, that's not the way it works. Everybody needs help in the world, and we need to learn that we need to come together as a community.
That is a very powerful statement. And I really wish more of our policymakers and people who are in a position to make sure that resources and food as well as supplies are available to the population that you talk about and to care about each other. That's a big part of what is missing. As you know, scripture teaches us to love thy neighbor as thyself. And if we just even thought about how we treat each other that way, it would make a big difference. So Caroline, tell us a little about yourself, how you got involved, how long you've been doing this, and what motivates you to do this kind of work.
So, my name's Caroline. I'm 17. I'm from New York City. I go to school in Virginia now. I've been like a part of Coach Dave's Team Dreamers for a long time since I was younger. My mom's known him, my grandmother, and I've been working with kids since I was about 12 with him, and he's given me the opportunity to. And I feel like, especially over quarantine, we've been running morning workouts at 8 a.m. Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I feel like it's just so important for like kids, especially in this neighborhood, because being in quarantine, it like changes your mindset on certain things. And I would hate for like kids to come out of this and have a lazy mindset and be like, well, I've been in the house for so long. And it also gives them a chance to go outside and like roam free, like how they usually do Monday through Friday at school. So I'm really invested in that. So yeah.
So you say you're in school in Virginia. What school and what program are you in school?
Tell them what you got your scholarship for.
Excuse?
Tell them what you got your scholarship for.
Oh, I'm a track runner. So I go to boarding school. It's called Episcopal High School. It's in Alexandria, Virginia, like the Nova section. I got a track scholarship, basically.
And what grade are you in now then?
I'm a rising senior, so I'll be a senior next year.
A rising senior. I love how that's said. Usually when you ask students where they are a rising senior. Well, we're hopeful that you'll be able to return to your school in September. As we now know, you've been out for a while. So what age group are you working with in the program now with Teen Dreamers?
Usually it's about ages like 5 to 13, but lately like there's been less and less kids due to Corona and not everyone can come. Sometimes we'll Zoom meetings, so if you can't come in person, if you're not in the neighborhood, they'll do it through the camera. But now it's about 8 to 11, I would say. So yeah.
That's a pretty young age, especially when you said earlier about 5 years old. You can actually work with 5-year-olds in terms of teaching them what about track and what you do.
Definitely. I mean, kids, like, you can't just take one kid and they have a little sibling. So, it's nice to have though. It keeps me young.
Well, maybe that's why I'm talking to all of you all, keeps me young thinking anyway. So Dave, talk a little bit more in detail though about Teen Dreamers. I know that our office has been working with you and we became connected more recently during the virus, but I know that you've been out there for a long time. So talk about Teen Dreamers.
So Teen Dreamers, it looks like a sports program, but it's not exactly a sports program because what we do is we train kids to be coaches, first to themselves and then to help their community. So you don't have to win a basketball game or a track game to be a star in our program. You have to learn how to help other people. And it's becoming very, very important right now because the kids in our program are helping out in their house. The kids in our program are still staying fit, still doing the exercises, and they know the importance of reading books. So in our program, we try to help improve the community and not just have the community battle against each other. So we're training kids to be leaders and help out. We call it education through sports, service, and camping.
And your program is how old again?
We start, well, don't tell everybody, but we're supposed to start in kindergarten, but every now and then one of my alumni come, so I have to sneak a pre-K in there, okay? But we start at the age of 5. And the young people you see, they're the key to it. They're the key, and it's exactly what's missing from school. The kids need the social and emotional attachment. You understand? You can't learn everything from a computer. There's a lot of children that come to the program not because they like me, but because they love the young people who work with me, like Carolyn and Jay. So we have a whole bunch of great young people. They do reading, they sing songs with the kids, they exercise with the kids, and they put them on the path of a scholarship. Because you have to start young. The other neighbors know that. They know you're never too young to start getting ready for a scholarship. And that's what we try to do. Even while the thief is stealing all our opportunities, the thief COVID-19, we're going to keep trying to get kids on a path to a scholarship.
So is there a specific catchment area in which you work, or are you throughout the city, or what area do you basically concentrate your work?
So I'm going to let you know. My school is in Washington Heights. My church is in Harlem. So I'm from Uptown. Uptown is my catchment area. No one's making me choose and separate between both of them. And one of the beautiful things about our program is it has diversity. It has all different types of children working together, including Latinos, including African Americans, and a lot of the newcomers that don't look like us have also embraced my program. So we have a wide range of diversity in our program.
How are you funded? How do you get funding for your program?
The funding, we're a small program. So our parents do a lot of fundraising. We get some grants from Councilmember Mark Levine, Robert Jackson, Al Taylor. The elected officials in Northern Manhattan are pretty good to us, okay? But a lot of our work is done by volunteers. A lot of our work, we get a lot of support from the school, but our biggest support comes from the Alumni Association. So we don't have paid staff members. We have volunteers who come in from the Alumni Association. And our secret weapons are the students of Mailman School of Public Health. We have students from the Mailman School of Public Health who are here working on their second degree that do a lot of volunteering and training and program improvement to help the Dreamers grow and secure more funding.
During this time of COVID-19, I think all of us have had to think about different ways of doing work and the engagement of the broader community to make sure that we're reaching the more vulnerable ones, the poor people, disinherited people, seniors, and people who need some support, whether it's food, whether it's masks in this particular climate we're in now, but also help with education and other resources in terms of the work that the three of you, in which the three of you are engaged. So I see, interested enough, during the time of this pandemic, models that are being looked at, and your model for Team Dreamers of how you basically, through volunteers, accomplish a great deal of work that is needed. And thinking about ways that we can support your efforts. And I think volunteerism is certainly important. That's how most of us, certainly I was born and grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, at a much different time, but volunteerism in terms of going out there, getting involved, led me to be a part of the whole civil rights struggle in 1963. And that those experiences really dictated further the work that I did, going on to become a social worker, and then as elected official and continuing public service through the community-based organization that I lead, the National Black Leadership Commission on Health. So the model that you talk about, I think, is something that we need to look at and think about how we can follow such models for the purpose of involving more people in our communities, some volunteers, some paid. So what do you think all of this has shown you during this pandemic of how we can strengthen and empower our own communities locally through these kind of efforts?
I think the importance of my program and what we try to do is we're going to show the importance of young people and how much they can help, because the kids need emotional support. The teachers need emotional support. The parents need emotional support. And the teenagers have a gift. They can give attention. They can help out in so many different ways. I believe once we get through this pandemic, well, we're not going to get through it for a while. Education is never going to be the same. We're now going to have to do small groups. We're now going to have smaller groups. You're not going to see any more classrooms with 30 people in them. And we're going to have to work more on our spirits instead of just working on actual reading and writing and arithmetic. You understand? Because kids are lonely, parents are stressed, and teachers don't know which way to go. So we have to do things that uplift the spirit and strengthen the spirit. And I can tell you something. It's not a day that goes by when one of my teenagers doesn't say or do something that makes me want to keep going out here and moving it again. So the teenagers, and having them come into the schools, after school programs, recess programs is a key to what we're going to do coming up in the next year. And we have to make sure that the parents have as much support as the kids, because the parents are now the teachers in their house. that parents are now the coaches in their house. So our teenagers, our young people, spend a lot of time explaining stuff to the parents, translating for the parents. This is how you do this on the computer. This is how it works. So the city might not never be able to get to everybody's house, but if we start training teenagers how to help out, then every building can have a couple of captains that parents can know they can question on how do we do this. So I'm going to be
Okay.
counting.
Okay, now we often hear that we don't hear enough from our young people. So I've got two young people sitting here in front of me, Javon and Caroline. So I want to hear from you about everything that we're going through now. What do you think we need to do to continue to strengthen our community, to reach more young people and make a difference? So let's start with you, Javon.
Well, what I think we need to do is the only way this will get better is if people really come together. That's the only way it gets better, is if more people come together, we get in an agreement and say, oh yes, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna stick to it, and this is how we're gonna do it. And there's no buts or ifs of why we're gonna do it. This is what we're doing now because we're trying to get the community to become a better place. So when the new generation come in, they won't have to have a problem of this coronavirus crisis and staying in the house, where they can go outside and play in the playground and have fun.
So what do you think is the best way for us to reach our youth? Because they're not watching, not to say this is not categorically speaking, but I'm wondering if sufficient number of our youth are watching CNN or MSNBC or nightly news and or regular news programs that serves to provide some information, and then of course our having to give interpretation to the meaning of a lot of what we hear. What's the best way for us to reach these youth and make sure that they're getting the information that you have to provide?
I mean, the whole thing is you want them on your side. So the whole thing is you try to talk to them. I mean, you really can't force nobody to do something that they don't want to do. But the whole thing is to try and get them on your side, because once you get them on your side, that shows how great of a leader you are and how they love your energy and how you do things in the community and how they want to be around with you.
Caroline, what do you think in terms of our outreach to youth? What's the best way to do this, and how can we uh, continue to get the message, and what is the right message to get to our young people today?
Right. So I definitely agree with Javon. And to piggyback off him, I feel like we have to set a precedent for how we deal with this for like future times this may happen. And I think just reaching out to youth like in a way that's like interesting and can like point out, because there's a lot of things that are helpful, but a lot of youth people see it as, oh, this doesn't look interesting to me, like I don't care, and they'll like kind of bypass it. So just reach out to them in a way that they can relate to, maybe posters in buildings or different ways that can really pop out, and just something that's like set in place and like kind of like an itinerary for how we like overcome this. So
You mentioned something very interesting, and neither one of you just said social media only, which I expect to say, well, get on social media, they're all on social, but you didn't say that. Caroline, you said even posters and finding ways to get their attention. I have posted in places where young people go. I thought that was very interesting. Can you just say a little bit more about that?
um for me, social media isn't really like an interesting place for me because a lot of people post the same things and you kind of just swipe through it and you overlook things. I feel like if you put like interesting things in places where they're most like vital, like everyone goes home, like after you go to the supermarket for groceries, you come home, like you're definitely going to see those type of things. And I feel like if it makes sense and it just like broadcasts to those kind of people, then yeah.
Javon, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, to add on what Caroline said, I agree because social media doesn't really tell a whole story. To be honest, I feel like art is what tells the whole story because art is when you're expressing your emotions and when you can actually see it. Like you could do art in so many different ways. You could do it by painting, acting. There's so many different ways you could do art. And when people look at art, they see it as a gift to them. So art is something that's really changed the world. Without art, I feel like the world wouldn't be where it's at.
And I see the art behind you in terms of your own space. Well, you two have certainly added something to this conversation in terms of how we might best outreach to youth that I think is, we are certainly interested in terms of our organization working with Teen Dreamers to be able to continue the dialogue. So in the 30 seconds that we have left, Dave, is there anything that you want to say that you think would be hopeful that has not been covered that you want to make sure our viewers are aware of?
My parents and the people I talk to in terms of education have said they believe the summer should be for arts and science. They believe that kids have missed out on a lot of things and the summer should be for arts and science in small groups. And the final thing I want to say is we have to do our census. Everyone needs to fill out their census. And if you've done it already, tell your friend to do it. It's online. 10 questions in 10 minutes and help the city for the next 10 years.
And for those of whom you work with 18 and over, be sure to vote. Let me thank our guests today, Dave Crenshaw, Javon Martin, and Caroline Panton for joining me today here on MNN to talk about your work as youth leaders and youth activists. And this is C. Virginia Fields here at MNN for our show, and we thank you so much. And this program is always provided to help inform our audience about more of what we are doing. And you can certainly follow nblch.org, Facebook, Instagram, linked, and we thank Manhattan Neighborhood Network for making these shows possible. And our viewers, we thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, and thanks to our guests.